Las Posadas is the story of Joseph and Mary seeking shelter on the night that Christ was to be born. But throughout the story, they are rejected. There's no room at the inn. Las Posadas originated in Mexico, in colonial Spain.
And this was a tradition that became deeply rooted in San Antonio.
I remember when we were very, very young, people walking through the neighborhood. But that's almost like a dream. It was a wonderful dream.
But it's very relevant today because for many, many Latinos, migration has been a painful experience. And along with migration has come a lot of rejection. There's no room for you because you are who you are.
It's very important to me as a mother to pass on to my children what my mother taught me, and it also helps them understand our traditions, our roots, where we come from.
In this country, yes, I want very much to continue the Mexican tradition. I value these Mexican traditions very highly, and I don't want to lose them.
Y no las quisiera perder.
Bienvenidos todos ustedes a la Gran Posada. Quiero dar una breve explicación antes de comenzar. Yo soy el Padre García de la Catedral y ahora vamos a iniciar una tradición muy antigua aquí en San Antonio y una tradición muy antigua en las Américas. And it has been going on probably about 400 years. And in San Antonio, it's been going on about 267 years. So it's a wonderful, beautiful tradition that we carry forth today. En que vamos a entrar y vivir la historia de José y María buscando posada para el niño Jesús.
In San Antonio, Texas, every year just before Christmas, hundreds of people gather to walk together through the historic center of the city. Many are Mexican Americans, Mexicans, Tejanos, all following Joseph and Mary, José y María, as they search through Bethlehem for lodging, or in Spanish, posada. The origins of Las Posadas are lost in time, but the tradition of Las Posadas has been celebrated here since the Spanish arrived, long ago when this was part of Mexico.
The Spanish came to this area in the late 1600s. This was called Yamaguana, which is a Native American word for paradise. So when the Spanish arrived here, they discovered paradise. And they immediately set up Mass here on the Feast of St. Anthony to celebrate Mass on the banks of the river that they named the San Antonio River.
The Spanish established 5 missions along the river in the early 1700s. The missions were communities of Franciscan priests and brothers who gathered native people to live and work with them. The goal was to convert the native people to the Catholic faith.
Las Posadas originated, at least from what we know here in South Texas, in Mexico, in colonial Spain, really, when the evangelizers, the first priests and the first ministers that came over, wanted to try to teach the indigenous people, the native people, about scriptures and about the story of Jesus. And so one of the ways that they felt was the best way, that was to actually get the Indians to enter into the story. And so they devised a series of little ceremonies and plays and dramas and rituals that the native people would actually take parts in.
And there was competition to see, who was going to get the part. Like in theater, there are no small parts, only small actors. And so this was the churchyard drama, the churchyard theater out there in the community.
And as everybody learned their part, then they began to learn the story more of Jesus. That's what we know to be the origins of Posadas, at least in the New World. Not quite sure if there might be some connection, and there probably is, with the Old World, with Spain. which had a long tradition of popular religiosity, and this being transformed in a new way in the New World. And we picked it up since then in South Texas as part of our heritage and our culture and our tradition too. I was born in San Antonio, and I'm from what we call Tejano family. That is a family that has been in Texas since Spanish colonial times, about maybe 250 years. So we're a family that has deep roots in Texas, but deep Tejano or Hispanic Texan roots. For me, this is part of growing up in San Antonio and South Texas, Las Posadas and other kinds of traditions that you do at Christmas time.
From the mission churches, the celebration of Las Posadas moved into the early Tejano communities. For 9 days, a procession of neighbors went from house to house bearing statues of Joseph and Mary. The people outside would ask for lodging. The people inside would turn them away. In 1983, San Fernando Cathedral began sponsoring La Gran Posada, a one-night celebration of the traditional 9-day posadas. The singing is led by the cathedral choir, and the procession takes place through the historic city center.
La Gran Posada is designed to be a celebration of the entire community of San Antonio. And so it's done downtown, and it's done connecting the major historical points of the downtown area with the cathedral, which was the earliest and the first parish church of the city.
San Fernando Church was a simple adobe structure that served the Spanish colonists who settled here. The year was 1731, and the new settlement was known as Villa de San Fernando, or the town of San Fernando. Near the church was the presidio, or military fortress, called San Antonio, that protected the town and nearby missions. Eventually, the new town assumed the name of the presidio, San Antonio.
So we walked through the center of the Mercado, the old Spanish market of San Antonio. That was a traditional place where people bought and sold the produce and the cattle, the merchandise of the old times.
Colonial San Antonio was a town of merchants and artisans, surrounded by vast ranches and small farms. The market, or mercado, drew people from the countryside who came to buy, to sell, to trade, and to socialize. Today, El Mercado is still a gathering place for local people as well as tourists.
Then from the Mercado, we began to go to the seat of power, the civil power. We start with going to the old Spanish governor's palace, the place where the person who was in charge of the Texas region, the region of Spain that was north of the Rio Grande.
Colonial Texas was a province of Spanish Mexico, located north of the Rio Grande River. From San Antonio, the governor controlled all of Texas.
And with us tonight is Councilman Roger Flores and his wife, Vanjie. He is the Central City Councilman, the one who is the councilman for the downtown area. I'd like to ask him if he would just share a couple of words of greeting with all of us.
Thank you, Father David. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you very much for keeping the traditions alive that is part of our culture here in San Antonio. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes y también les doy las gracias por tener tanta gente con ustedes aquí que se queda la tradición.
I was asked to be at the Gran Posada because I obviously was a councilman of this district. Well, I think it's great because that keeps that tradition alive. You know, a lot of it is being lost a lot of times because of TV, because of distances where houses and we're growing so fast, and it's kind of difficult. I find more people calling me because I'm in the restaurant business and saying, Roger, how do you make tamales? And how do you make buñuelos? How do you do some of these things that were traditions that were in their family that have kind of gotten lost because either the family has gotten elderly or the mother can't do it anymore, or they've lost the parents. And so consequently, I think that everybody wants to be kind of reunited with the past and with those traditions that we all grew up with. The Spanish Governor's Palace, that was one of the first buildings that was here in the downtown. It kind of puts you back in time when this tradition was becoming something that was part of not only the church, but also part of the tradition of San Antonio as it began to unfold into the city that it is today.
The Spanish Governor's Palace was built in 1722, when San Antonio was made the capital of the Spanish province of Texas. But by the early 1800s, life in Spanish Texas was changing rapidly. Anglo settlers from the United States were coming to live here, attracted by land, cheap and plentiful. In 1821, Mexico won independence from Spain. Almost immediately, the Anglo-Texans, as well as some Spanish-speaking Tejanos, pushed for an independent Texas.
A very distinct social phenomenon occurred in Texas with these English-dominant immigrants. They came in numbers. They came as families. And families tended to act like, or to perform like cultural cocoons. And they would close up, and everything of value to them remained inside, and anything of value on the outside was rejected. So on the outside, then were the values of the Mexican Texans, the old line Tejanos who have been here for years, dating back to the days of the Spanish missions. You had about 25,000 English-dominant immigrants against about 7,000 Spanish-language settlers. And so numerically, the old line Tejanos were just overwhelmed. And these Tejanos found themselves, as the trite expression goes, being strangers in their own land.
In 1835, armed conflict broke out between Texans who wanted independence and the government of Mexico. The next year, in a small battle at a former mission in San Antonio, the Texas rebels lost to Mexican forces. Remember the Alamo became a rallying cry for the rebels, who declared Texas to be a republic. The same year, General Santa Anna, president of Mexico, ceded independence to Texas. 10 years later, Mexico and the United States went to war over Texas. The U.S. won, and Texas and thousands of Tejanos became part of the United States of America.
And so it went from being the ordinary mainline culture to being the culture of the conquered. And it develops certain dynamics of fear, of shame, of mistrust.
As a result of the war with Mexico, the United States gained a vast territory, what is now California, Arizona, and New Mexico, and large sections of Colorado, Nevada, and Utah. In return, the the United States guaranteed the property rights and political rights of the conquered Spanish-speaking people, including the right to retain their culture, language, religion, and traditions. Often these rights were not respected.
And there was a slow dispossession of Hispanic Texans in terms of their lands, their property, their political influence, their social life. In many, many ways, they slowly became dispossessed and kind of second-class citizens.
But despite long years of political and social dispossession, Hispanic Texans struggled to maintain their culture. They succeeded in part because the border with Mexico has remained for them largely a formality.
San Antonio, being close to the border with Mexico, never lost its Hispanic identity. And I think as San Antonio over the years has continued to receive many immigrants from Mexico and Latin America, it has continued to reinforce its Hispanic heritage, its Mexican heritage.
My name is Arcadia Lopez. I have been in the States since 1913.
When Arcadia Lopez was a little girl, she crossed the border with her family to escape the Mexican Revolution.
My parents were living in Sabina Hidalgo, Nuevo León. My father was a barber, and a barber shop was a sort of a meeting place. And he was talking about against the revolution. And soon they came for him at the barber shop and threw him in prison. As soon as my mother learned about that, she left my little sister with my aunt, and she took me, and I remember hanging onto her long skirts, and away we went to the prison.
Arcadia's mother convinced the comandante of the prison to release her husband. Immediately, the family fled Mexico, traveling by ox cart.
It had rained, and the rain had produced flash flooding. And when we came to a deep hole, the water was up to the ox necks. And my father had to get down and lead the ox up the road into a safe place. And my mother, of course, was scared to death, and I was scared to death. The only one that wasn't scared to death was my little sister, who was in my mother's arms.
Arcadia and her family made their way safely to San Antonio, where Arcadia's father thought he had family. But San Antonio was a bustling city, and they couldn't find anyone who knew their relatives. They were strangers, and they had no place to stay.
And we came, and we went up the street and down the street, and it was a very hot August day. And we were getting tired and thirsty and disappointed. And finally, we saw a little old woman, and she asked my parents, "What in the world are you doing with those two young children?" My father was carrying my little sister, and I was holding to my mother's hand. And they explained they were looking for relatives. And she said, "Well, it's getting late. Why don't you do that tomorrow? Come with me and stay with me." So she introduced us to the barrio. She had a one-room apartment, but she fed us and let us sleep on the floor.
In a city where they were strangers, Arcadia's family found Posada. Her father found work as a barber, and the family rented a two-room apartment in a vecindad, an apartment building with an interior patio where the tenants shared a common water tap and bathrooms.
The conditions in the barrio were pretty bad. However, there was one good thing. Most of the families were immigrants from Mexico. They had the same needs and interests that we had. And we stuck together. You know, that's the way we survived.
Every year at Christmas, Arcadia remembers how her family and neighbors celebrated in the barrio.
When I saw my mother taking the kerosene lamp from a cardboard box where she kept it, when she cleaned it and put some kerosene in the tank, I knew Christmas was very near. And she would say, you know, I'm doing this because we're going to put the lamp on a nail on the front door. It is to light the way for Joseph and Mary to go to Bethlehem. She said, well, we're going to church, which is not very from here, and you're going to see Las Posadas. We saw the platform with the statue of Mary and Joseph. Mary was riding the donkey, and Joseph was guiding the donkey. It meant a lot to us. I think all the families in the vecindad went to Las Posadas or had some kind of ceremony to celebrate the beginning of the flight to Bethlehem.
For the little girl from the barrio, her family, and her neighbors, keeping the Mexican traditions of Christmas kept them from feeling so homesick.
It gave us a feeling of support, a feeling that we could attach some meaning to. We wanted so much to belong to something, and we had something to belong to.
Arcadia grew up to be a stylish young woman and a successful elementary school teacher. During World War II, she married Johnny Lopez, who encouraged her to return to school for a doctorate in education. In the 1960s, Arcadia became a teacher in experimental bilingual classes.
Buenos días, niños. I'm going to tell you a story about going to buy tortillas. And this happened a long, long time ago.
Because she had struggled in school to learn English as a second language, she became an advocate for bilingual education.
When the tortillas were ready, wrapped up hot and smelling delicious, Lita couldn't find the nickel. I felt lost, really lost. But I was determined to conquer the English language and to do as well as I could in school. And I was beginning to learn some of the English language, the English words. I would invite the children in the vecindad to come, and I would act as teacher. I would write the words that I had learned in school, and the children would come and repeat them. She looked and looked, no nickel. She was in no hurry to get home to tell her mother what had happened. She knew her mother had very little money. Lita felt bad and hated to tell her mother she had lost the nickel. Finally, Lita faced her mother saying, "Here are the tortillas. I lost the nickel to pay Doña Katia for them."
Arcadia retired in 1980 after 46 years in education, but she still visits local schools occasionally to read to the children. This story is one of her own, taken from her childhood experiences growing up in the barrio.
I had a feeling for a long time that it was important for me to write about my early life, the life of my family in the United States, because if it isn't known, people will never appreciate what we went through to make it better for our children, grandchildren, and the children to come. My passion is for writing. If I'm not writing, I'm not happy.
In 1992, Arcadia published her biography, Barrio Teacher. Other books followed, children's stories in English and in Spanish.
¿Y ustedes me van a ayudar? Sí. El corazón de las cosas es lo importante. ¿Qué es lo importante? What will they be holding to if they don't have those traditions to keep? I think that if they do keep the traditions, they have something to hold on, something that they belong to, something that they should be proud of, like having an anchor to hold to. And I think in our case, it worked very well.
Since the Rio Grande became the U.S.-Mexico border in 1848, Mexicans have crossed over. Some, like Arcadia Lopez and her family, came to find safe haven during the Mexican Revolution. Others have crossed the river to visit family, and many have come in search of work.
The Rio Grande is more of an inconvenience than it is an international boundary. But over here with the Hispanic, and here in San Antonio, there's this constant re-nurturing by somebody who has come, or going back in the other direction by crossing the border.
I'd like to ask the mayor if he would just say a few words to us.
On behalf of the city of San Antonio, I want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year.
Más despacito.
Mario Mandujano is part of the Mexican immigration that helps keep the culture strong in San Antonio.
I consider him to be our director of plays or dramas at San Fernando. The two big ones that we have every year would be La Gran Posada and the Passion Play. And Mario directs both of those in the sense that he helps organize the people who are going to be in them, gives them direction as to what their roles are, and then, you know, he'll help take us through a rehearsal. He animates people.
El papel de José. Ten en cuenta que tú eres María, de veras, en serio. Serio, de veras. Métete el papel de que estamos haciendo. José y María, ¿a dónde van? Y inclusive tú le puedes...
Soy de... I'm from Apaseo, in Guanajuato, Mexico.
Guanajuato, México. Realmente...
I had never thought of coming to the United States.
Venir a los Estados Unidos. Salí de la secundaria.
I graduated from high school, and I worked for a while as an electrician.
De electricista. Pero para poder entrar a la compañía grande...
But to work at the big electric company...
Tenía que tener 18 años, perdón.
You have to be 18 years old.
Entonces,
I was only 17, so I was missing a year.
Me faltaba un año, pero mi cuñado...
But my brother-in-law said, it's better that we go to the United States. You can go there for 1 year and make some money. And I liked that idea.
Me gustó la idea.
In 1984, Mario came to the United States looking for work. The journey was not easy, crossing the Rio Grande into Texas.
Compramos unas bolsas de plástico.
We bought some plastic bags and we went to the riverbank. We waited until night came. We took off our clothes and put them in the plastic bags. We tied up the bags and put them in our mouths. And then we began swimming across the river.
El río, nadando. Realmente yo venía con
Actually,
mucho miedo.
I was really afraid.
There's no way to know how many people cross the border illegally from Mexico. Many are apprehended and deported by border guards. Last year, 1.5 million. Others lose their lives crossing over. In 1998, over 250 people died of exposure or from violence committed by people who prey on los ilegales, the illegal ones.
Ya estando frente al Río Bravo.
As I was standing in front of the Rio Bravo, or the Rio Grande, as it's called here, so many things went through my mind.
Oh, se viene toda la mente. No simplemente es un miedo.
It isn't just being afraid of one thing. It's being afraid of many things at the same time. While I was crossing, I said to myself, maybe I'll get over, maybe not. This is one fear.
Eso es un miedo. Cruzo.
I get across, and after that, what am I going to do? This is another fear. The third fear is, I'm going to cross, I'm going to get there, but what about my family in Mexico? They're going to suffer simply because I wanted to go over. More than anything else, I was thinking about my mother.
Más que nada yo pensaba en mi mamá. Entonces, gracias a Dios cruzamos bien.
Thank God we got across safely. When we got to the other side, we had to hide under some trees.
Abajo de unos árboles. Entonces mi cuñado dijo,
So my brother-in-law said, at midnight, the train leaves for San Antonio. We have to jump on.
hay que brincar.
Mario arrived in San Antonio with his brother-in-law who knew the city. But then his brother-in-law had to return to Mexico, and Mario was left alone, without work, in a strange country.
Como vivía con amigos, entonces los amigos...
Because I was living with some friends, of course, they required me to pay them for rent and food, but I didn't have a job yet. So what they said was, okay, you can't live here. Look for another apartment, another place to live.
Ya no puedes vivir aquí. Busca otro apartamento, otra casa donde vivir.
Mario was out on the street. He had no work. He was in a strange country illegally, so he couldn't turn to public assistance. He was stranded, homeless. He slept in a public park.
Mario's life is what Posada is all about. Mario was knocking at the door, and the door just happened to be the Rio Grande River, which is the border between Mexico and the United States. And that door was not open to him, even though he desperately needed to enter that door.
In desperation, Mario decided to seek help from people he hardly knew.
Sí, a buscar a los amigos que saludaban.
I went looking for some friends who would greet me in passing. I explained to them that I really didn't have anywhere to stay, if they could help me at least for a week until I could find some work. And they said, yes, you're welcome.
Eres bienvenido, pues. Entonces, viví con ellos, pero ellos me consiguieron.
They said, okay, so I lived with them, and they found work for me. We got a document that allowed me to work.
Para poder trabajar.
They found work for me as a waiter in a hotel.
Me consiguieron trabajo en un hotel de mesero. Entonces, ellos...
They went often to the cathedral. Every Sunday they went to the cathedral, and they sang in the choir. They invited me to sing in the choir, too.
Podía participar en el coro. Pero llegando a catedral me encontré...
Going to the cathedral, I found a different situation than what I had been living, because these were a different kind of people. Everybody participated in the choir. Women, men, young people of all ages. And they began to accept me. They didn't look at me as a stranger.
O sea que no me miraban extraño.
The next year, Mario was asked to play the role of Joseph in La Gran Posada. The role of Mary was played by Lupita Alvarado, who had immigrated from Mexico as a child. They became good friends, and as their friendship deepened within the community of San Fernando, they discovered they were in love. 2 years later, Mario and Lupita decided to marry, but their joy was clouded by Lupita's mother, who opposed the marriage.
It was hard for us, our relationship in the beginning, because we were young and I was a college student. He was an immigrant, and my mom didn't accept him at first because she as a mother wanted someone better for me.
Once again, Mario was rejected, but he and Lupita were deeply in love and married at San Fernando. Although Lupita's mother attended the wedding, after that, she refused to see the newlyweds. As Lupita continued to play the role of Mary in La Gran Posada, it seemed as if she was also living out the posada.
One of the times I felt rejected, like she was when she was asking for an in and nobody will help her. You know, like a lot of people that I know, including Mario, that was once an immigrant, and they were asking for help, and so were we.
But the young couple didn't give up, and life continued to change for Mario. When their son Marito was born, Lupita's mother couldn't resist her grandbaby. The family was reunited. Through his contacts at the cathedral, Mario found a steady job and a career he'd never dreamed of.
Si a mí me gusta,
I really like what I do, cooking, trying out ideas that are mine.
ideas mías, y mucha gente dice que soy buen cocinero.
Many people say that I'm a good cook, but I never say I'm a good cook, only that The food that I prepare is done with love and affection.
Mira el patito. ¿Le gusta el patito este? ¿Sí? ¿No te gusta? Sí.
And whenever someone does what he likes most, I believe it's going to turn out well.
Más le gusta, yo creo que todo le va a salir bien. O mini corn dog.
I think for Mario, San Fernando was key to what I would like to say was his rebirth or his new birth in his new
Ándale,
home.
agarra tu tenedor.
And I'm very proud of San Fernando for that. And yet, as I reflect on it, I believe that that has been San Fernando's traditional role in San Antonio.
Buenos días a todos ustedes. Bienvenidos a Catedral para
San Fernando is the one institution in San Antonio that was never taken away from the Mexican people. San Fernando was a beautiful place. I remember as a young kid walking in, and it was the most beautiful church anywhere, you know, and so San Fernando was a great source of pride and glory. We had a high school at the time when people were saying Mexicans didn't care about education. They had the finest secondary and high school. It started the first hospital, which is De Santa Rosa. So San Fernando was a source of great pride to the people.
San Fernando has been the place, especially where the Tejano or the Mexican American or the immigrant or the person who maybe didn't feel comfortable expressing their language, their traditions, their background, their Hispanic heritage. In the larger community, maybe they felt the hostility, maybe they felt it wasn't welcome. In San Fernando, it was always welcome.
To sit in that cathedral, to imagine what it must have been like for those that came before us, the Mexican people, the Spanish people, the mixture, what it must have been like. How incredible.
Tina Navarro is a costume designer at Trinity University. She grew up in San Antonio and left to study in the Northeast. When she returned, she was drawn to the cathedral in search of her cultural heritage.
I feel maybe a greater need to come in touch with my roots. I never married and I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews. And I feel like they are looking for something. And I, too, am looking for something. How does that feel? Feels okay? I want to muss your hair up a little bit.
Why?
So you look like you've been sort of, herding sheep. Well, actually, this is about my third year being involved as a parishioner at San Fernando Cathedral. I felt like, what could I, as a member of the cathedral, contribute in terms of my time, in terms of just for my own spirituality? And so I thought, this is a skill that I have, and this was something that I could share. This is prettier. It's prettier. Mm-hmm. Is it okay? I think for the person wearing the costume, it makes you feel like you're back in time, like you're that person, and you're that character, and how people must have felt just wearing those layers, and how you move in a costume. And I sensed a feeling of that sort of going back into time, just looking at them.
With a master's in theater design from Yale University, Tina is a highly trained professional. She wanted to create costumes for La Gran Posada that were more accurate historically.
What I did for this was I went through some of my costume history books and looked for examples of the clothing that people wore at that time. It was a very spiritual experience for me because, in a way, as a costume designer, it's like you become those characters. You kind of have to become those characters to get inside of their thoughts, their feelings, And that's the exciting thing about being a costume designer for me. Pues mira, Mario, estas son unas ideas que dibujé yo para la obra. No sé si tú estabas en la iglesia ese domingo que el padre David habló de María y la idea de enseñarla embarazada.
Yo creo que es muy buena idea.
Qué bueno. I brought a lot of the costumes over to the costume shop with the help of Mario, and with the dress forms that we have in the shop, we sort of looked at layering some of the old with some of the new. Y el color rosa también da una apariencia de más, te digo, más frágil.
Y de madre a la vez.
Y de madre a la vez, muy bien.
Realmente yo aprendí mucho con ella.
Really, I learned a lot from her because I didn't know anything about costumes. But because she's a professional, she began teaching me.
Y entonces ahí ella me empezó a enseñar, empezamos a meter poco a poquito los...
And step by step, we began using more professional costumes. And then the posada was looked at differently. It began to change. The people taking part were admired. The way they were dressed.
La gente vestida está perfecta, yo digo que es perfecta. Ya nomás vamos a hablar con el padre.
Con el padre.
Ajá.
Go with him without the beard, with whatever he has. And of course, Father David all along was kept informed of what we were doing.
Podemos discutir eso porque, I mean, they were great, pero...
And he was sort of acting as producer. There's wonderful Mexican food and Mexican people. And then coming to San Fernando, and where you see how they work together to keep their spirit alive. It's keeping our roots alive and passing this on to the children, those yet to come, who can keep it alive.
Yo me voy a subir para enseñarte cómo te vamos a subir. Mira. Ok, mira, Lupe. La mano derecha va a estar aquí contigo, como la lleva siempre. La mano izquierda es...
Months of meetings and coordinating volunteers coalesced the night before the event in a rehearsal.
He's got wonderful imagination, and wonderful creativity, and people follow him.
Cuando estaba en México, nunca...
When I was in Mexico, I was very shy. I couldn't speak up.
Yo no podía hablar. Cuando estábamos en la escuela, el maestro me decía, a ver, Mario, tú... No, yo no hablaba.
When we were in school, the teacher told me, Mario, you don't ever talk. And I didn't talk. I was embarrassed. I was shy with everybody. But now that I've discovered what I like, I don't want to give it up. It's in my blood.
Eso es como mi sangre misma, ya me llama. Not too close to the burro, remember? No, not too close to the burro, okay? There we go.
Putting the body into a procession with a bunch of other people, something happens to us in that process.
People traveled from outside of San Antonio. They came from all over in a way to participate. And it's like the crowd just grew and grew. And it was like this incredible amoeba that just was sort of all moving together in one direction. And that was extremely powerful and exciting.
The people that take part in the procession come from all backgrounds and walks of life. And so people bring their children, they come as lovers, they come as old folks, they come highly dressed, they come poorly dressed. Everybody feels at home. Everybody's at home. So I think that, again, these public rituals have a magic to them and allow everyone to feel united and plugged in.
Something happens that is transformative of the person, the group, and of the community through which we're walking. And I think that's one of the powers of Posada today. I think the power to transform us, to make us reflect on what are we all about, and what are we struggling through, and why do people have to ask even today for Posada? Why are there so many homeless today? Why are people still being rejected in so many ways today?
Ultimately, it's a tradition that my mother taught me so that I can pass it on to my children. In this country, yes, I want very much to continue the Mexican tradition. I value these Mexican traditions very highly, and I don't want to lose them.
Y no las quisiera perder.
Mario and Lupita now have 3 children. Marito, Andres, and Aimee. Every year, the family gathers to make traditional Mexican Christmas dishes. Everyone helps make the tamales.
¿Está saliendo bien? ¿Ves? Sí. ¿Otro? Ahí viene otro buñuelo.
¿Quién quiere más buñuelos? Ya están.
¿Cómo nos quedaron los tamales? ¿Los tamales que hicieron? ¿Dame?
It was hard for us at the beginning, but we knew that our love would, bring us together at last.
De un portal grande donde nace el agua fría, yo le di mi corazón a Jesús, José y María, titiriteando de frío y llorando de dolor.
Lupita's mother joins the family for the traditional adoration of the baby Jesus.
It's very important to me as a mother to pass on to my children what my mother taught me, the traditions of Gran Posada and adoring the baby Jesus, because it helps us throughout the life, It brings us closer together as a family.
Ya tengo por quién trabajar.
Now I have someone to work for, so that one day my son will say, my father was a good cook. My mother helped me in every way. My father did everything possible to give us a decent life, at home and in church. They were good models. My father taught me everything he knew. This is what's going to mean most to me.
Eso es lo que va a valer para mí. Seguir adelante y no mirar para atrás.
To go forward and not look back, and to help whoever is in need. After what I went through, why wouldn't I help someone else?
Y si yo pasé por eso, ¿por qué no lo voy a ayudar? Porque a veces la vida es muy dura.
Because sometimes life is very hard in other countries. Because in Mexico, sometimes there isn't any work. You don't have a way to buy necessities.
No hay con qué comprar uno las cosas. Yo creo que es la situación más triste que ha pasado en mi vida.
I believe that this situation was the saddest of my entire life.
Es sentirme vivo una vez más.
Now I feel alive again.
Pero muy contento.
And very happy. Happy because in spite of everything, I have a beautiful family.
Tengo una hermosa familia.
The last stop of La Gran Posada is San Fernando Cathedral. Traditionally, at the last place where Joseph and Mary ask for shelter, they are accepted.
We have come to the end of our journey and our pilgrimage through downtown San Antonio. We have traced the steps of our ancestors and have been faithful to their traditions. And now we sing our final posada before we ask entrance into the light of Christ and the life which he brings to the world. So let us sing our final posada.
When they finally find a home that receives them, that's when the big fiesta takes place, because of the joy that comes to the home that receives the homeless.
Today, I think we're reinterpreting what Posada means. Number one, I think we're reinterpreting the need to do something like this because this is who we are. This is part of our culture, our tradition. This is part of the faith expression of who we are. And we should celebrate that. And that is something that makes us proud of who we are. Because over the history of our people, we haven't always been proud of our culture and tradition. We haven't always been taught to be proud of our culture and tradition. And many times we have been, in a sense, put down because of our culture and our traditions. And so this is a way today that it's being reinterpreted and saying, I'm proud in my heritage, in my family, in my history, in my culture, my traditions, and my faith. And all of this somehow is intertwined. And I kind of don't understand how it's intertwined, but it's there. It's me. And I love it.
But that responsibility to give back to the community of which you are a part. So they would teach that in the posadas too, to share. If you have the good fortune to succeed, then you share with your community. And the community continues being alive.
I think we need to challenge the young people to want to keep these events alive and to be proud of who they are and what they are, and to be proud of those that came before them, to keep their history alive.
It's a cultural thing, it's a spiritual thing, it's a religious thing. It's a way for the community to come together and express the best of who we are.
For your videotaped copy of La Gran Posada, please call toll-free 1-800-299-7729. For a limited time, your order will include a free copy of Silent Night to help you celebrate your own posada.
A portion of tonight's programming is brought to you in part by a grant from Kestrel Printing, where digital files become full-color brochures, newsletters, business cards, and other marketing materials. Before we print, we listen. 512-469-0409.
Next time on Austin City Limits, rockin' new music from Johnny Lang.